coming of age, youth initiation and religious training. The sacred guide. In the ceremonial preparation chambers adjacent to Tenochtitlan's Templo Mayor, where ancient traditions transformed children into spiritually awakened adults and sacred initiation rituals connected individual growth with cosmic responsibilities, Itzel Tlazohteotl, the most revered coming-of-age coordinator in the empire, supervised the final preparations for 23 young people approaching their transition to full community membership, while understanding that authentic spiritual maturity required not merely physical development, but systematic sacred education that could awaken divine consciousness, establish proper relationship with the gods, and prepare individuals for their adult obligations, serving both personal spiritual fulfillment and community religious continuity through generations of cultural transmission. The sacred transition ceremony, scheduled to begin at dawn, would mark the culmination of months of intensive preparation for young people ranging in age from 13 to 16 whose readiness for adult spiritual responsibilities had been carefully evaluated by priests, family elders, and educational instructors. Each candidate had demonstrated sufficient maturity in religious knowledge, moral behavior, and community service to warrant consideration for initiation into the sacred mysteries that governed adult spiritual life. Necalli has shown exceptional dedication during his purification period, maintaining proper fasting discipline and demonstrating genuine understanding of cosmic responsibilities, Itzel noted while reviewing individual candidate assessments. However, his bloodletting rituals still show hesitation that suggests incomplete acceptance of necessary spiritual sacrifice. We must address this concern before permitting his advancement to full adult religious status. Such detailed individual evaluation reflected the sophisticated understanding of spiritual development that characterized Aztec coming-of-age practices. Initiation ceremonies represented not arbitrary age milestones, but recognition of actual spiritual maturity that enabled individuals to participate meaningfully in adult religious observances and community responsibilities. The preparation process had begun 4 months earlier, with candidates entering intensive educational programs that expanded their previous religious instruction to include advanced theological concepts, complex ceremonial procedures, and personal spiritual practices necessary for adult participation in sacred activities. This preparation emphasized transformation of consciousness rather than simple accumulation of knowledge. The educational curriculum included detailed study of creation myths and cosmological principles that explained the divine origins of the current world and humanity's role in maintaining cosmic balance through proper religious observance. Candidates learned the sophisticated theological framework that connected daily activities with universal spiritual purposes, while understanding their personal obligations as conscious participants in cosmic maintenance. Understanding the Five Suns cosmology enables young adults to comprehend why their spiritual practices matter for universal stability, explained Tlazohteotl, one of the senior instructors responsible for theological education. Without this cosmic perspective, religious observances become mere empty rituals rather than conscious participation in divine purposes that sustain existence itself. This theological education distinguished adult religious understanding from the simplified instruction provided to children while preparing initiates for the complex spiritual responsibilities that community membership would require. The practical spiritual training included systematic instruction in advanced meditation techniques, bloodletting procedures, and ceremonial protocols that adult community members were expected to perform regularly as part of their religious obligations. Candidates practiced these techniques under careful supervision while learning to maintain appropriate spiritual attitudes during sacred activities. The meditation instruction focused on developing conscious contact with divine forces through disciplined attention practices that enabled communication with cosmic intelligences governing various aspects of existence. Young people learned to quiet mental distractions while opening awareness to spiritual influences that could provide guidance for ethical decision-making and community service. Effective meditation requires understanding that individual consciousness participates in universal divine consciousness, observed Necalli, a specialist in contemplative instruction who had guided hundreds of young people through spiritual awakening processes. The techniques we teach enable recognition of this connection while developing capability for receiving divine guidance in daily life situations. Such meditation training prepared candidates for the spiritual awareness necessary for meaningful adult religious participation while establishing personal practices that would support continued spiritual development throughout their lives. The bloodletting instruction taught candidates the proper techniques and spiritual attitudes for offering their life essence to the gods through controlled self-sacrifice that demonstrated commitment to divine service. This practice represented one of the most important adult religious responsibilities, requiring both technical competence and appropriate spiritual understanding. Bloodletting serves as regular reminder of our debt to the gods who sacrificed themselves to create our world, explained Necalli, a priest who specialized in training candidates in sacrificial practices. The physical discomfort involved helps develop spiritual discipline, while the blood offering provides actual nourishment for divine forces that sustain cosmic order. This instruction emphasized bloodletting as conscious spiritual practice rather than mere ritualistic behavior, while ensuring that candidates developed appropriate attitudes and technical skills for safe performance of these important religious obligations. The ceremonial protocol training prepared candidates for their roles in community religious celebrations, including proper behavior during temple services, participation in seasonal festivals, and performance of household religious observances that adult community members were expected to maintain regularly. The community service requirements involved candidates in practical activities that demonstrated their readiness to assume adult responsibilities while providing opportunities for applying their religious education in real-world situations that tested their spiritual maturity and practical competence. Service projects enable candidates to demonstrate integration of spiritual learning with practical action while contributing meaningfully to community welfare, noted Tlazohteotl, who coordinated candidate community service activities. We observe how well they apply religious principles in challenging situations that require moral judgment and personal sacrifice for collective benefit. These service activities included assistance with temple maintenance, support for elderly community members, participation in agricultural work, and help with religious education for younger children. The projects tested candidates' willingness to serve others while demonstrating their understanding of religious values in practical applications. The family preparation process involved extensive consultation with parents and extended family members who would play important roles in supporting candidates through their transition to adult spiritual responsibilities. Family involvement ensured that initiation ceremonies reflected community recognition of individual growth while establishing support networks for continued spiritual development. Family participation demonstrates community investment in candidate development while creating ongoing accountability for maintaining adult spiritual standards, observed Milintica, who specialized in family coordination for coming-of-age ceremonies. Parents receive instruction in supporting their children's spiritual growth while learning about their own ongoing responsibilities for nurturing adult religious development. This family involvement reflected understanding that spiritual maturity required community support rather than purely individual achievement, while creating networks of accountability that helped maintain religious standards throughout adult life. The purification procedures required all candidates to undergo systematic cleansing of body, mind, and spirit through fasting, bathing, confession, and spiritual counseling that prepared them for receiving divine blessings during initiation ceremonies. These purification practices emphasized spiritual transformation rather than simple ritual compliance. The fasting requirements involved graduated reduction of food intake over several weeks that culminated in complete abstinence from solid foods during the final 3 days before initiation. This physical discipline developed spiritual strength while creating receptive consciousness for divine communication during sacred ceremonies. Proper fasting creates physical and mental clarity that enables deeper spiritual awareness while demonstrating commitment to divine service through voluntary sacrifice of bodily comfort, explained Itzel Tlazohteotl, a specialist in purification practices who supervised candidate preparation. The discipline required develops character qualities necessary for adult spiritual responsibilities. This fasting instruction emphasized spiritual purposes rather than mere physical deprivation, while ensuring that candidates understood appropriate attitudes and safety procedures for extended food abstinence. The bathing rituals involved daily ceremonial cleansing with specially prepared water that had been blessed through elaborate religious procedures and enhanced with sacred herbs that promoted spiritual purification. These bathing practices combined physical cleanliness with symbolic removal of spiritual contamination that could interfere with divine communication. The confession procedures provided opportunities for candidates to acknowledge past mistakes while receiving spiritual guidance for developing better moral judgment and ethical behavior patterns. These sessions helped clear psychological and spiritual obstacles that might interfere with successful transition to adult religious responsibilities. Honest confession enables release of guilt and shame that can block spiritual development while providing opportunities for learning from mistakes and developing better decision-making capabilities, observed Necalli, a counselor who specialized in spiritual guidance for young people. The process prepares candidates for the moral clarity necessary for adult ethical responsibilities. This confession process emphasized spiritual growth rather than punishment, while providing personalized guidance that addressed individual challenges and development needs. The ceremonial preparations involved creating elaborate sacred spaces, preparing ritual materials, and coordinating complex sequences of activities that would transform individual candidates into recognized adult community members through divine blessing and community recognition ceremonies. The sacred space preparation included construction of temporary ceremonial structures, arrangement of ritual objects according to precise specifications determined by astronomical observations, and purification of ceremonial areas through elaborate religious procedures that ensured appropriate spiritual conditions for initiation activities. Ceremonial space must reflect cosmic order while providing appropriate environment for divine communication and community witness of candidate transformation, explained Itzel Tlazohteotl, who managed physical arrangements for coming-of-age ceremonies. Every detail carries spiritual significance that contributes to ceremony effectiveness. This attention to physical arrangements reflected understanding that appropriate environmental conditions enhanced spiritual effectiveness of initiation ceremonies while demonstrating community commitment to supporting candidate spiritual development. The ritual material preparation included gathering sacred objects from throughout the empire, crafting special ceremonial implements, and preparing offerings that would invoke divine blessing on candidates while demonstrating community investment in their spiritual development. The materials included precious feathers representing divine communication, jade ornaments symbolizing spiritual purity, copal incense for purifying ceremonial atmosphere, and specially prepared foods that would be shared during celebration feasts following initiation ceremonies. Sacred materials must reflect both cosmic significance and community investment in candidate development, noted Necalli during material preparation activities. The quality and appropriateness of ceremonial objects demonstrates respect for divine forces while honoring candidates' achievement of spiritual maturity. Such material preparation required months of advanced planning while creating opportunities for community members to contribute their skills and resources to support young people's spiritual development. The ceremony coordination involved precise timing of multiple ritual sequences that must occur according to astronomical observations and calendar calculations, while accommodating individual candidate needs and family circumstances that affected their participation in community recognition activities. The dawn ceremony would begin with individual spiritual examinations, where candidates demonstrated their religious knowledge and spiritual understanding to senior priests, who would determine their readiness for receiving adult religious responsibilities. These examinations tested both intellectual comprehension and spiritual maturity. Individual examinations enable personalized assessment of spiritual development while ensuring that candidates possess necessary understanding and commitment for adult religious responsibilities, explained Necalli. We evaluate not just knowledge, but spiritual attitude and genuine readiness for increased religious obligations. These examinations provided opportunities for final spiritual guidance while ensuring that only properly prepared candidates received initiation into adult spiritual community membership. The community recognition ceremonies would involve public acknowledgement of candidate achievements while formal transfer of adult religious responsibilities through symbolic actions that connected individual spiritual development with collective community welfare and cosmic spiritual purposes. The symbolic actions included presentation of adult religious implements, formal acknowledgement of spiritual maturity by community elders, and individual commitment ceremonies where candidates publicly accepted their adult spiritual responsibilities before assembled community members. Public commitment ceremonies create accountability for maintaining adult spiritual standards while demonstrating community support for continued spiritual development, observed Tlazohteotl. The public nature creates social reinforcement for religious obligations while celebrating individual achievement of spiritual maturity. These public ceremonies transformed private spiritual development into community recognition while creating social structures that supported continued religious growth throughout adult life. The celebration activities would include feasting, music, dancing, and storytelling that honored candidate achievements while creating joyful community experiences that reinforced positive associations with religious commitment and spiritual development. These celebrations demonstrated that spiritual maturity brought increased community respect and social participation opportunities. The feast preparations involved contributing food from families throughout the community while creating opportunities for sharing stories about candidate development and expressing hopes for their future contributions to community spiritual life and practical welfare. Celebration feasting demonstrates community joy in candidate achievement while creating positive associations with religious commitment that encourage continued spiritual development, noted Milintica during feast planning activities. The shared food symbolizes community unity while honoring individual spiritual accomplishment. These celebration activities created lasting positive memories associated with religious commitment while strengthening community bonds through shared recognition of spiritual achievement and collective support for continued spiritual development. As dawn approached and final preparations reached completion, Itzel reflected on the profound transformation that coming-of-age ceremonies represented for both individual candidates and their community. These sacred transitions created spiritually mature adults capable of meaningful religious participation while maintaining cultural continuity through systematic transmission of spiritual knowledge and religious responsibilities across generations. The coming-of-age coordinators who guided these sacred transitions served as essential facilitators of spiritual development, whose expertise enabled communities to maintain religious traditions while supporting individual spiritual growth that prepared young people for their adult roles as conscious participants in cosmic maintenance through proper religious observance. The initiation ceremonies themselves would create lasting spiritual foundations for adult religious life, while establishing social recognition of spiritual maturity that enabled meaningful participation in community religious activities and ongoing spiritual development throughout candidates' adult lives. The coming-of-age traditions of the Aztec Empire represented sophisticated integration of spiritual education, community support, and individual development that created spiritually conscious adults capable of maintaining religious traditions while contributing to community welfare through proper religious observance and ethical behavior guided by cosmic understanding. Through systematic attention to spiritual preparation, community involvement, and ceremonial recognitions, coming-of-age practices created successful transitions from childhood dependence to adult spiritual responsibility while maintaining cultural continuity that enabled religious traditions to survive and flourish across generations of changing social and political circumstances. The sacred transitions they facilitated became foundations of spiritual community that connected individual religious development with cosmic purposes while building social bonds that enabled community prosperity through shared commitment to divine service and mutual support for continued spiritual growth throughout adult life. Coming of age in Aztec society represented more than simple physical maturation. It created sacred transformations that connected individual spiritual development with cosmic responsibilities while building community bonds that enabled collective prosperity through shared religious commitment and mutual support for continued spiritual development in service to both human welfare and divine purposes.